All right, everyone, we're going to get started. Hi, my name is Annalise. I run Living Volumes, the spiritual business coaching website, and I'm super excited because right now I'm hosting my very first webinar. Today we're going to be talking about the Enneagram. So let's just get right into it. What is the Enneagram? So the Enneagram, you hear me say this all the time on TikTok and stuff, but the Enneagram is a sacred mathematical symbol that can be used. It has many purposes. I'm sure you've seen it used as a personality typing system. It also is less commonly used as like a roadmap, a planning tool. And that's what I'm going to be talking about here today. There are very few people that teach this work. The only one that I know of is the person that I learned it from. So that makes me number two, and that's really exciting. There's so much that can be gleaned from this. It is like one of the most powerful tools that I have ever studied. And so I'm really happy to see where this takes me, where this can take you. And yeah, all right. So it is a sacred symbol. It comes from the more like Abrahamic side of religion. So like the Sufis called it the face of God. It does have like a Christian, like a presence in early Christianity as well. But basically, let me share my screen here. We can take a look at the symbol itself. All right, so here we have the Enneagram, and you can see that it is a circle with a triangle in the center and then a jagged line that runs through the circle. And there are also 9 points on the circle. So it basically has those three main parts. It has that circle, the triangle, and the jagged line. So the circle represents time and space in this Enneagram. And that's another really cool thing about using the Enneagram is that it is a symbolic teaching. And so it doesn't require any words. Of course, it requires words to explain and understand, but if you're at the level of symbolic teaching, which is the third level of spirituality, you could look at this symbol and just receive all of this information that I'm about to tell you. So that's what's so convenient about symbolic teaching is that you don't need words. You can look at it and you can remember just from looking at this one shape all of this information that I'm about to tell you. So the circle represents time and space. And time is cyclical for us humans here on Earth. It is also linear. It follows a line. That is the reality that we live in. That is the fourth dimension, the fifth dimension being spiritual teachings. And so it's really important as someone who is a spiritual seeker or who wants to run a business with that spiritual side in mind. It is so important to remember that, like, time is not the enemy here. Time is a force that you need to learn how to work with. And if you learn how to get good at working with time, then you will have success because it is just a part of our reality. So there are two kinds of time. We have Chronos time, which is like government time, the passage of time, those minutes, that linear by the book. And then there is Kairos time, which is like more of a moment-based time. And it's not quite as linear. It isn't like equidistant. It isn't as measurable. So Kairos would be things like having to wait to go out for a walk until it rains or until it stops raining. That's like an example of Kairos. You have to wait for the perfect moment. So Kairos represents the space through which the perfect moment must come. And for an example of this, we can look to the Bible, the book Ecclesiastes. It talks about how to everything there is a season. There's a time to dance, there's a time to laugh, a time to cry, a time to work, and a time to rest. All of these things, when it says time, it is using the Greek word kairos in the original um, writing of the book of Ecclesiastes. They're talking about the perfect moment or the perfect time for certain things to happen. So it's more of a seasonal type of thing. And so let's just talk real quick about some of the benefits of time. Of course, it is an inescapable reality. As a human being, flesh and blood, skin and bones, time is a part of the deal. So, some of the benefits of time: continuity, the ability to look back. You can see your progress. I can see where I started, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and I can experience satisfaction because I see this continuity and this progress throughout time. And it also provides you the ability to see like gradual transitions and to put into like, what word am I looking for right now? It allows you to facilitate gradual transitions from one thing to the next. It is a form of organization for a reality, and it also helps to differentiate dreams from reality. And that's something that is so interesting because I am someone who, for various reasons, is a very vivid dreamer. And for that reason, I definitely know that when it comes to differentiating dreams from reality, that linear progression of time is huge. That is like the main difference. So from there, um, let's see here. So the circle represents time and space, and now let's take a look at the triangle. So let me just make this small again. All right, so the triangle represents the law of three. And the law of three states that for all creation to occur, three forces are required. There are 3 points on this triangle representing the active, passive, and neutral forces. And those 3 forces are required because one is needed to start the event into motion and the other 2 are needed to sustain the event. So we'll talk about the neutral point first. The neutral is the top of the triangle. This point is point 0 or point 9, and this point represents God. It represents the setting of an event that takes place. It represents like the why, the reason. All right, and so then the passive point, point 3, we'll take a look again. So point 3 on the triangle right here is the passive point. And this point is the denying or resisting or feminine passive force. And so then the third force is the active force, which is at point 6. And this is the desiring or the masculine force. So just to go over a few different examples of an active, passive, and neutral force, in Christianity, we have the Trinity, it's literally representing this law of three. And so we have God the Father as that neutral force, the reason why everything is happening, the setting, the motivation. And then we have the Holy Spirit as the passive force, because it is indwelling in everyone, and it kind of sparks action, but it doesn't take action itself. And then we have the active force of the Son. And the Son, as we know, Jesus Christ came to earth as a man to enact change and to share the truth of God with people in a very active, hands-on way. So other examples, we have active and passive, sperm and egg. Sperm is active, egg is passive, but then we have this neutralizing force, which is the womb. And so what's really interesting about these forces, about this truth, is that sometimes it will seem, when you only know 2 forces, that those 2 forces are in conflict, but the truth will always be that there are 3 forces, and that third force is what neutralizes the conflict. So between sperm and egg, maybe there is, there is this sense of conflict as they try to merge into one and create new life. And the womb is that force that neutralizes the conflict. Another example would be like, there would be like the conflict between a hungry person and food, and a restaurant or a kitchen would be an example of a neutralizing force. It's a setting, and it is this force that as soon as you introduce a kitchen into that event, it's no longer like uncooked food versus hungry person. It's okay, the event is in motion. The kitchen is making it happen. So another one, we have the buyer and the seller being active and passive. The buyer is active, the seller is passive, and then it is the product that is this neutralizing force. There's no conflict when there's a product. The buyer can act, the seller can provide something for the buyer to act on, and it's all returning to that product. And so one more thing that I just want to go over, the active force in the three like human impulses. The active is I can, the passive is I wish, and the neutral is I am. So all of those two that seem conflicting, I can versus I wish, like I can do this, but I wish to do this, is neutralized by I am, the reality that you are and you can do. All right, so that is a lot of three. And the lines on that triangle, we can also go over those real quick. They represent willpower, fear, and sacrifice. So this first line here is the willpower line. And this is kind of, you could see how it will make sense more when we go into talking about the points, but you use your willpower to start an event off. And then from there, when we hit point 3, we go on to the fear line. And so fear is going to be always passive. And when fear is passive, that is right, because you don't want fear to be causing you to act or to be the thing that you're always returning to. You don't want fear to be the setting of any event in your life. And so then from the fear line, we hit the surrender line, or the line of sacrifice. And this line, again, we'll see when we get into talking about the points exactly how these lines all make sense. So now we can talk about the law of 7. So the law of 7 is depicted by the line of supervision. And the line of supervision shows how to go backwards and forwards in time. It shows how to reverse engineer an end result to success. And it shows you how to plan an event using time travel. And it also shows that nothing in life follows a straight line. So as you can see, this line of supervision, we're going to say it starts at point 1, and from point 1 it goes to point 4. From point 4 to point 2, 2 to 8, 8 to 5, and 5 to 7, 7 back to 1. So those are the 3 parts of the Enneagram. Now we can talk about how to use the Enneagram to plan. So I have been absolutely loving using the Enneagram in this way, because it's so intensely practical, and the math, it turns out right every time. Or I should say, if you get the math right, the event will turn out right every time. So I'm just going to open up my notebook, maybe get some examples up for us to discuss. All right. So when you are planning something on the Enneagram, you are always going to start at point 0, which is also point 9. Point 0 is where things kick off, the neutralizing force, and at point 0 is where you make a decision. So, for example, right now I made the decision to teach a webinar on the Enneagram. From point 0, we move to point 1. Point 1 is to set your intention. So my intention for this webinar is to get more experience teaching about what I'm passionate about. And from that intention, we're going to figure out what the active, passive, and neutral forces are. So let's just do that together real quick. I'm going to draw myself a circle and a triangle. And let's just think about this. All right, so there are three main things that I want everyone to understand, and these are going to be the active, passive, and neutral forces. So, point zero is going to be action and uses. I'm not going to write this down a second time. I already wrote it. Point zero, this is my plan for this webinar. Point zero is action and uses. Point one, we've made our decision at point zero, and point one, we set our intention. And then point one is also where we run this line of supervision. So from point one, we have gleaned that the three forces, the neutral force is the actions you take, and the uses for the Enneagram. The passive point three, is the parts and the lines and laws governing those parts. And then point six is the plan and the points. So those are the three forces. And then from point one, we go to point four. What are the limitations? The biggest limitation I can think of with this webinar is misunderstanding from my communication to your understanding as a viewer. That's the biggest limitation I can think of. And so point two, then, what tool? Because from limitations, we follow the line up to point two. The tools that I will need are information. So to prevent misunderstanding, I can combat that by making sure I have good, solid information. So from point two, the next point that we plan is point eight, which is, excuse me, let me pull it up here. All right, so point eight is the retention point. It's also the point of vision. So my vision is that anyone who watches this, anyone who tunes in, achieves understanding of this topic, of what the Enneagram is. And so, knowing that that is my vision, we follow the line down to point five, which point five is the point of action. It is the point of no return and the point of most attention. So, point five is having the viewer use it with their own goal. And so from point five, we go to point seven. Point seven is presentation, and the presentation is going to be when it is complete with correct math. And so then we go back to point one. So I just want to stress that every time you plan something on the Enneagram, you are following from point one to point four, from point four to point two, from point two to point eight to point five, and from point five to point seven, and then seven back to one. So now that we have established exactly what's going on every point of this Enneagram, now is the time where we take action. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the line of supervision is kind of like a way of time traveling. It shows you how to reverse engineer a goal to success, and it allows you to jump around back and forth and figure out exactly how everything fits together. But now that you know how everything fits together, you started at point one, or you started at point zero, you move to point one. And point one is to run that line of supervision. So now that you have planned and ran the line of supervision, you move along around the circle, around this linear time. So point one was time traveling, essentially. And now that we have time traveled, we keep going along linear time. So point two, now we gather the tools. So when I was preparing for this, I made sure that I had all my information, all my notes looked good, everything like that. And then we hit point three. And so another thing that's really interesting is this triangle. It represents three forces, and it also represents things that are kind of outside of our control. So we can anticipate them, and we can figure out what they might be based on how this math works. But we do not have control about ultimately how they show up. And so, point three, I have the parts and the lines and the laws. And so this point is always going to be a ritual. And so right now we are performing this ritual of going through planning how to plan with the lines and the laws. And so now after point 3, we hit point 4, which is misunderstanding. No one is attending live, which is completely fine, unless, let me just double check. No, yeah, just me. So when I upload this to YouTube, this would be the point where people start to maybe have questions. Like if something I'm saying isn't making sense, this is where those are going to come up. And so then I'm going to do my best to clear those up. And then we're going to hit point 5, which would be having the audience use the Enneagram with their own goal, which we will get to. And then from point 5, we go to point 6, which is the plan and the points. And this is the point of will. And then from point 6, and again, point 6 is always going to be a willpower point. So point 0 will always be making a decision. It will always be the neutral force that everything is returning to. Point 3 will always be the point of ritual. And point 6 will always be the point of willpower. And so from point 6, then we go to point 7. So once you have planned, once you have taken that action and you have powered through and kind of use your willpower to make sure that you get the math right, then you will hit point 7 where you have a complete Enneagram with correct math. And once you have a complete Enneagram with correct math, that leads to this vision, this retention of knowledge, and this understanding. So, achieving this vision of having you, as my audience, understand what the Enneagram is and how it works. And then we go back to taking action. And so, that is just a little breakdown. So now we can go over the points. Point 0/point 9 is to make a decision. And a decision is marked by an action step in a direction. And then we hit point 2, which is tools. Okay, let's go line of supervision order. So from point 0, we go to point 1, which is to set the intention, run the line of supervision. So we go to point 4. Point 4 is the limitations. The limitations, typical ones, especially for business, is going to be the price, like how much something costs, how you want it to feel, trying to make everyone happy. And so, based on those limitations, the tools, the biggest tool that you will probably need for any event that you plan on the Enneagram is boundaries and also anticipation of what problems you might encounter. Based on what problems you think you might encounter, that is going to inform what tools you use. So 1, 4, 2, and we go to point 8, the point of retention, the point of vision. And so this is kind of what we anticipate the vision is, what the fallout might be, how we're going to follow up on this event. And then 1, 4, 2, 8, 5. So the point 5 is that point of action, again, point of no return, point of most attention. And then we hit point 6, which is the will. 1, 4, 2, 8, 5 to 7. So 7 is where we think about how to surprise and delight people and what is an offer that people can't refuse. So my point 7 on this Enneagram webinar, I imagine there being surprise and delight when someone completes their own Enneagram for the first time with correct math and everything works and it's flawless. That sounds delightful. And that to me is also an offer that you can't refuse. All right, so let's see. Now, okay. Let me come back. And let's stop. How do I stop sharing? Stop share. Okay. So now we are going to go over how to do it for yourself. And because there is no one attending live with me, we are going to use an example that I went over. I have a couple examples, a couple of case studies. So here we have this Enneagram that I made with my brother on how to, it's a roadmap for how to climb a 14er. We're Colorado people, so that's what we do for fun. We climb up 14,000 feet in the air above tree line and we summit one of our many giant mountains. So let's talk through it. Point zero is going to be making the decision. I'm going to climb a 14er. From there, point one, set your intention. So the intention is to accomplish climbing a 14er, to like physically accomplish this, physically and mentally. That's what it's really about, is like proving to yourself that you can do it. So from there, we figure out the active, passive, and neutral forces. So the neutral force is going to be this feeling of accomplishment. Like, oh my gosh, I did this. That is the reason why. So that's going to go at the top of the triangle. And then the passive force is going to be the mountain itself, slash the hike. And then the active force is going, yeah. So the mountain, the hike, the route. And then the active force is going to be the person doing it in their body and their mind. And so now that we know that, we can run the line of supervision. So from point one, we go to point four. Point four is limitations. The limitations that someone might encounter trying to do something like this: their physical ability, the weather, gear failure, time or lack thereof, and then poor planning, which kind of goes along with time. And so from those limitations, we jump up to point two, again, following that jagged line of supervision, starting at point one, we go to point four, then we move to point two. Point two, the tools. What tools are we going to need? We're going to need good gear. We're going to need fitness, both mental and physical. We're going to need knowledge of the route, and we're going to need discernment to know if we need to turn around. So now that we know what tools, or we have an idea of what tools, then we're going to go to point eight. Point eight is the vision, the retention. So my brother's vision for this is hard work with a satisfying conclusion. And so now that we know that, that's simple vision. Point five is going to be the point of no return. We decided that for climbing a 14er, point five is going to be tree line. Because when you hit tree line, you're so close to the top. It's also the part where it gets the most difficult. And it is like the point of most attention. It is the point of action. You need to keep going. You need to power through. It takes the most focus to get from tree line to the summit. And it is also the point of no return, because why would you turn back there? You got so close. And so from point five, we go to point seven. Point seven is the point of presentation. We decided that would be the summit, because when you summit a 14er, that's it. That's where you take your picture that you're going to post on Instagram. You hold up the little sign, you eat your snack, like you've achieved it. That is like when you share to the world, I'm at the top of a mountain. From point seven back to point one. So that is the plan finished. And okay, so that is the plan finished. And then comes taking action. So again, we started at point zero, we made a decision. Point one, we set the intention, and then we ran the line of supervision. So we did our time travel planning, we did our reverse engineering, and now that we've done that, we bounce around all the way to point seven, which takes us straight back to point one, which means we're back on track to do linear time. So 0, 1, completed 1, now to point two. Point two, we establish what tools we think we're going to need. Now we go gather them. So we gather good gear. We get our mental and physical fitness in order. We figure out what the route looks like, and we plan accordingly. And then we make sure to figure out what warning signs we need to look for as far as weather, so we have that discernment. And then comes point three, which is one of those three forces. So again, this is something we can anticipate, but we do not know exactly what it's going to look like until we're actually there. And point three, as I mentioned before, is the point of ritual. So point three is going to be where you take repetitive action over and over, and that is going to be this ritualistic element that gets you, it's an essential step in completing your goal. It's kind of where you put the work in. It's like the behind the scenes type of stuff. So this is point three, we decided, is the mountain or the hike. So he's going to do one foot after another, this repeated ritual of hiking, hiking, hiking all the way up the mountain. And as he is completing that ritual, we're going to move into limitations. His physical ability is going to be called into question. The weather, something might come up there. There may be gear failure. There may be a lack of time. It may start taking longer than he realized, especially if he had poor planning. But regardless, ideally, we are able to move through those limitations. Sometimes, like if there is a bad storm that rolls in, you're just going to have to start over. But you move through the limitations, and then all of a sudden he gets to point 5, that point of most attention, that point of no return. That is tree line. Once you hit tree line, no turning back, but also you need to put all your willpower in, which leads us to point 6, which is the point of will. And point 6 represents his body and his mind. And so this point right here is, again, it's like we can anticipate what it will be, but we don't know exactly what it's going to look like. What we do know is that it's going to require willpower. So he's going to tough it out. It's going to be the hardest part, and he's just going to have to keep going. And then he will reach point 7, the summit. So the summit we established, and then point 8, he's going to achieve his vision, his retention of hard work with a satisfying conclusion. Because he made it to the summit, he's going to hike all the way back down, and then there you go. Hard work with a satisfying conclusion. Point 8 goes to point 9, which is also point 0, and we get that feeling of accomplishment, which is the reason why we started it in the first place. So there you have it. It's all mapped out. Hopefully you can see this, but I think it's so incredible. Like, it is the best tool to use. I wonder if I can flip the screen. No. Okay. So that is another example of how to use the Enneagram. And it took us probably about 10 minutes to plan the whole thing out. And we had an idea at first of what it might look like. But as we started going around, we started seeing how like certain aspects of our original plan didn't quite add up with the math. And so we tweaked it. And this is what we came up with. This is a final product. And now he knows exactly what to do. That's the thing, is like this is a roadmap. This is a skeleton. And from this, you have all of the information you need to bring something to fruition. So now let's look at another one. This is going to be, let's see, one I did with a friend who had, or has the idea to start a company, like a makerspace coffee shop type of deal that platforms artists. So let's just take a look right here. Okay. So the Enneagram is for this company that he wants to create. And the intention, so he made a decision. I want to make this company. And then we hit point 1, set the intention. The intention is to platform artists. And so from there, we figured out what the 3 forces would be. The neutral force is the platform, because that is what it's returning to. That's the why, is to give artists a space to express themselves. So the space to express themselves is the why that he's doing this. The passive force is going to be the artist, because that is like that is okay. So the active force is the audience. They are the ones consuming the art, and then the artist is the passive force. They're putting the art out there. So from the platform, the reason why we have the artist, and the artist sends their work out to the audience, and the audience can view it because of the platform, and the platform is for the artist who puts their work out for the audience, and the audience can view it because of the platform, and the platform is there to support the artist. So you see how there's that like cyclical nature to this to these 3 forces, and that is how you know like the event is working, because it goes around and around and around. There's this perpetuity to it. And so The intention was to platform artists, to encourage artists and community. And so the audience could also be considered like a community. All right, so from point one, we did our time travel, planning on the jagged line, or no, sorry, we're at point one. We set our intention, and now it's time to do our time travel on the jagged line. So we go down to point four, limitations. We don't know how it's going to be received. We need to find a space. He had specific requirements that he wanted the space to have. So like large windows, other elements, and then another limitation would be this person's social battery is, finite. So then from there, we know the limitations, so we jump up to point two, which is the tools. Tools, community. The plan is another great tool. A meeting space is a tool. Having a mentor would be a great tool, and grant writing would be a great tool. So from point two, we go to point eight. Point eight is the vision. This is the retention. So what does it look like? For him, it looked like hosting an art showcase, an in-house event, establishing social media, and a centralized website. From point eight, we go to point five. Point five is that point of most attention, point of no return. So that would be registering the LLC, getting a business bank account going on, making a website, going on social media, posting on social media, and planning that art showcase. So from point five to point seven is presentation, and this is where we're serving it up to the world, to the audience, to the community, and so the art showcase would be that presentation moment when it's available to everyone. And then from point seven, we jump back to point one. So we did our time travel thing, and now we can keep going along that circle of linear time from point one to point two. We gather our tools, we gather the community, we gather up our plan, we get our meeting space, mentor, and yes, we gather those up. Then it's time for the artist. So the artist comes in. And because this person is the artist, we need to establish a ritual for them. So that ritual could be creation. It could also be something to up the discipline. So like an email newsletter, something we came up with. Also, there's a specific workout. This was just tailored to his specific needs, but this is where the ritual comes in once more. And then once we have that ritual, like, sending out a regular newsletter list to just keep everyone up to date and also enforce some discipline. After that, we hit the limitations. So reception might be underwhelming. Finding a space might be harder than you realized. These specifications might be, hard to find. Then, of course, the social battery, like creating something like this that's community oriented takes so much networking. And so there we hit those limitations. And then point five, we make the website, we post on social media, we plan out the art showcase, we register the LLC, all of those types of things. And then we hit point six, which is the audience. And so this is the point of will. And this is where he's going to be, making sure like posting on social media, connecting with people. That's kind of the big like willpower point, is like to continue connecting with people. Even when, your social battery might be kind of drained, like you have to keep building those connections and fostering that sense of community so that you can achieve this goal. And then we hit point seven, which would be hosting the art showcase. And then point eight would be how everyone receives that. They have this event in-house, centralized website, social media, all of that. How is all of that received? And then we come back to the platform. We have the art showcase all the way up to the reception of the art showcase and the retention from that. And then it comes back to the reason why we're doing it, the platform. So all of this built up to, platform. That's why we're doing it. That is what all of this was working towards. And so the platform grew. From everything we did, the platform grew. And then because we want the platform to keep growing, we do it all over again. And so here's that once again. Hopefully this is useful to all of you. I would love to do Q&A live, but I'm still figuring out exactly how to build an audience. So this is all of the information I have for you. I'm going to be emailing this out after I finish the recording, and I'm also going to be uploading it to YouTube. If you would like to follow along with my teaching, my website is livingvolumes.com. My Instagram is at Living Volumes, my TikTok at Living Volumes, and I would love to see you in any of those places. So please come find me. My YouTube is also at Living Volumes. All right, I think that's gonna do it. Thank you so much for watching. This is really honestly like a huge boundary pushing moment for me to be talking about this stuff online and putting myself out there. I'm going to keep doing it. This is only the beginning. Very, 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 very exciting. And so you will be seeing more of me, whether you like it or not. Get into it because you can't get out of it. I am coming. Thank you.